I'm Dr. Mark Hatala, and I want to welcome you to our discussion of the differences between A through F papers. So this is to give you a professor's objective perspective on grading student papers. But first of all, hey, please buy my books. I have 3 books on APA style, which will answer all of your questions and help you to become a better writer. Now, students believe, in my experience, that multiple choice tests are objective because they have a correct answer. Now, they're willing to believe that some questions might be tricky or misleading, but they understand that there's a best answer. And so, a lot of times when I'm writing multiple choice tests, there'll be multiple correct answers, but there's one best answer, which I realize that annoys students, but it helps differentiate how well you know the material. The other thing I'll oftentimes do in tests is I get bored writing tests, so there'll be a pattern like A, B, B, C, C, D, D, or like 5 B's in a row, and then the student has to think, he wouldn't put 5 answers of B in a row, would he? And so it becomes silly. The grading of papers, though, students perceive differently. They perceive it to be subjective. And so many students think that grades are determined by how much the professor likes the student, so that favorite students are given more leeway in their writing. How long the paper is, which I think comes from high school and junior high school English classes, where your teacher really likes you to write a long paper, because that means you took the assignment seriously. And also how tired the professor was when they were grading. So I only grade 2 or 3 papers at a time, and then I take a break because it's an old expression, but after a while, everything reads like a B minus. So I can tell you though, after reading thousands of papers across my career, there are certain grading criteria which emerge. And so that's what I want to talk about in this presentation. So this presentation is going to give you the professor's perspective, and that's me off to the right there. You can tell that I'm a professor because I'm in front of books and I'm wearing a funny hat. Now, as papers descend the grading scale, they have many of the same bad features as other papers in their grade range or above, because errors tend to cluster. So like a C paper will have the problems that a B paper has, plus additional errors. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at there. But I want to make it clear to you that there are no bad papers, just papers that need revision and a rewrite. But let's start with the easiest papers, which are A papers. Almost perfection. These are the things that I find that I'm oftentimes writing on student papers. Now, they're the easiest to grade, but I have to write comments on them because that's how the students know that I'm actually reading through their paper. And so I write things like interesting and good point. So what mistakes do they make in an A paper? They tend to be very small errors, like they'll use a direct quote, but they won't put a page number in the parenthetical citation. Or their reference page will be a particular reference will be missing a DOI number, which is digital object identifier number. Now, some sources have those, some don't, but sometimes students just leave it off by accident. And sometimes they write out numbers that should be expressed as a numeral. And so they'll say 72 participants rather than using the numeral 72. There are a number of rules dealing with numbers in APA style. What sets A papers apart is the author's comfort with the subject matter. And so they're able to identify issues on a particular topic and convey them to the reader. So they'll oftentimes use multiple sources within the same paragraph when they're discussing something. And they can also provide informed criticism on the research and present plausible avenues of new research. Talking about new research or where the field should go next, that's a hallmark of an A paper. A B paper is a solid effort. Now, they're often missing something or they're adding something. So, for example, they don't talk about future research, or they capitalize every word in their references. Instead of the sentence case, they use the title case. I have a video about sentence and title case if you want to watch that. But the easiest way to identify a B paper is through their use of hackneyed phrases. So they'll say stuff like, in today's society, or it's human nature to do a particular thing, as if there was any agreement about what human nature is. So don't use those phrases. It's not because people are unintelligent. It's because those are phrases that you could use in a high school paper, but you really can't use it in college. So instead of saying something about human nature, provide a statistic to illustrate your point about what human nature is like. Is it just a light edit away from being an A paper? For mechanical reasons, it might seem that way. But there are other issues that remain in a B paper. So, for example, the sophistication of the writing, their ability to integrate multiple studies or sources within the same paragraph, and really their level of expertise with the topic. It all comes out in a B paper. On a C paper, I often write, there's some good stuff here, because I'm always looking for good things to say when I'm grading. And there really is a lot of good things in a C paper because, for example, they found research. And so that's a good thing. But they also have many problems with mechanics. So with C papers, you see a lot of contractions, not contradictions. So they conversationally write their papers. So they use words like ain't, didn't, and don't. They also have spelling errors, which are just amazing to me because that means that they ignored the word processing program that told them they were misspelling a particular word. They tend to have a very conversational tone, and this is one of my favorite opening lines from a C paper. Think about the first time you ever tied your shoes. That's memory. It's actually procedural memory, and it's interesting that they're so oddly specific about tying your shoes. What about people who wear sandals? They don't have to tie their shoes. C papers also use a lot of I statements, which are very good in marital counseling, but they're inappropriate in an academic paper. So to illustrate that, because I teach romantic relationships courses too, instead of saying you shouldn't take the cap off the toothpaste, you would say, I get very angry when you leave the cap off of the toothpaste. And so you're owning that criticism. So this is from a C paper. I almost fully agree with Muscovici up until he says that people conform strictly to gain approval. This is not a persuasive essay, and your professor doesn't need to know what researchers you agree with and which ones you don't agree with. Just give the facts. There's also citation and reference issues in C papers. So in the body of their paper, researchers are often referred to by their full names, including their institutional affiliation, the journal where it's published, the title of the article. And reference sections are usually full of overcapitalization and a lack of italics on things like the title of books or journals. But these are problems that are easily corrected. So although a C paper contains some good stuff, it reads as if it was an enthusiastic conversation with a friend. So it's more like, hey, have you heard about John Bowlby's research? Rather than Bowlby 1969 investigated the impact of strangers, the strange situation. The student knows what's important, but has a difficult time communicating that information in an academic way. And so it's just a less sophisticated type paper. Now, a D paper is oftentimes a good rough draft, and that's what I'll write on their paper too. This is where we enter the realm of students who either don't know what they're doing or really just don't care. What differentiates a D paper from an F paper is effort. They actually do collect a series of studies. So sometimes some journals, they oftentimes use textbooks which are inappropriate. Websites can be appropriate or not. It depends on how legitimate, in quotes, that website is. And they try to mash all this into some kind of cohesive paper, kind of a bouillabaisse. So students who write D papers often write an entire paragraph and then just put a citation at the end of it, including the full name of the author and nothing else. So that's their idea of a citation. This is not what an academic paper is supposed to look like, but I hand out A papers from previous semesters so students can use that as kind of a template. And so they kind of just mimic what they've seen. And they have a superficial understanding of what a citation is, which is putting a name in parentheses at the end of a paragraph. But that just becomes an inappropriate way to write your paper. The thesis statements that they use, well, a lot of times they don't have a thesis statement, but the ones they do have are oftentimes so general, like different experiments will be discussed and explained. Okay, that's an actual one that has appeared in a D paper. Again, the student understands that they need to have a thesis statement, but they don't really understand what that entails. So, or they don't really know how to write one, but they can learn how to write one. The F paper is the please see me paper. Now, it's easy to beat up on F papers because the lack of student effort makes it seem like the F is deserved. But to tell the truth, it takes me far longer to grade an F paper than usually it took the student to write it because I'm having to write comments and correct things. It's oftentimes, it's always not just a few small corrections that need to be made. They usually just need to start over again. One of the distinguishing characteristics of an F paper is an utter lack of citation. Now, granted, they're using sources like Wikipedia, encyclopedias, and textbooks, but they still manage to avoid citing them. So that's an actual line too about claustrophobia. It affects a decent-sized portion of the population. So that would really require some kind of citation and I know some actual numbers about what decent-sized. There's also formatting issues. So they don't pay much attention to page length requirements. So they're oftentimes far too short, so 1 or 2 pages. But I also get 20 plus pages on a particular topic because they become interested in it and then they just keep writing. They often use interesting and creative margins and a host of different fonts. Now, you can use different fonts in APA style writing, but you should pick a font and stick with it through the whole paper. Don't like mix it up from paragraph to paragraph, but I have seen that. And their reference page oftentimes needs a Rosetta Stone to figure it out. They'll alphabetize the authors within a source. It's very odd. It's difficult for me to understand how they came up with it that way. But again, my job is not to judge folks. It's to teach them how to write a better paper. And so I want to reiterate, I truly don't believe there are bad papers or bad students or these are situational kind of things. Good writers oftentimes don't need a lot of revision. That's what makes them a good writer. But just because somebody writes an F paper doesn't mean that they're a bad writer. It means that they need to learn more about APA style. So I want to thank you for watching this video. Wish you good luck with your writing and ask you to come visit us at APA Central. There's lots of videos on writing. There's lots of other material that'll help you to become a better writer. And have a great day.